Welcome to the It Matters podcast. I'm your host, Walter Perez, and let's dive in as we help you grow your mindset and elevate your leadership. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the It Matters podcast. I am super pumped today because I have a very special guest, and her name is Abigail Stearns. We've only known each other for not too long here, maybe a few months here, but it's been great to connect. I actually had a privilege of being on a podcast that she hosts, which we will chat all about. But Abigail is a creative with an entrepreneurial mindset, which I love. And she's currently the marketing lead for BAM Canada, also Business as a Mission Canada. And I'm excited to chat about that as well. But I'm excited to have you here, Abigail. Welcome to the It Matters podcast. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Walter. It's great to be here.
Oh, yeah. I've been looking forward to this conversation because, you are a young leader, but you are leading in different capacities. And I love one of the things that you shared with me about who you are. And you were saying to me that you're a passionate about genuine relationships. And I can totally see that about you. And you want to become a stronger leader, which is exciting for me because I think as leaders, we need to always continue to grow. And one of my other favorite things that you shared with me was that you're excited about discovering what it looks like to be a co-creator with God. And
Yeah.
so, thanks for sharing that because I totally see that in the way you lead and what you're doing. And so, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what's happening in your world?
Yeah. Well, I feel like I ask this question all the time when I interview people, but now being on the other side, I'm like, how do I answer that? So as you said, my name's Abigail, and I am the marketing lead at BAM Canada. But aside from that, I am a wife to my husband, Ray, and I'm a sister and a friend. And I come from a big family, so that's a big part of who I am and in creating those genuine relationships. I love getting to know so many different kinds of people because I feel like that's what I grew up in my household. And I'm now living in Edmonton, but before this, I was actually born in Calgary, but raised in Langley, BC, and then moved out to Hamilton, Ontario for school. So I've lived in 3 provinces, and that also has given me quite the perspective on just Canadian culture. And I've gotten to meet so many people in that way too. So like you said, I love being creative. I love leading. I love just kind of anything that has to do with learning more about like personal development. So I'm huge into reading those kinds of books and just learning more about what God has for me in this life.
I love it. And I'm with you on that. There's something about as leaders, this hunger for growth and craving to not only better ourselves. I'll use a common line on this podcast that I want to help people maximize their God-given potential. And one of those ways is that we have to figure out our habits and our hunger for growth.
Yeah.
And so I love that you already do that. It seems like it's natural for you now.
Yeah. I was never a reader growing up, and I could never pick up the books that other kids could. And I just thought, I'm not a reader. And then I started to figure out there's actually like nonfiction books, and I'm really into that. And I'm into like learning how to develop and grow and listen to all the podcasts. And so I guess it's come naturally over time.
You know what? I was the same way, actually. I wasn't a reader really growing up. And I believed that lie about myself that, hey, I don't like reading. I don't care to grab books. But then once I picked up the books that were interesting to me, but adding value as well, now I have a reading habit. And in fact, I even have a library at home that I continue to add to and love exploring because it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit because you work with BAM Canada, Business as Mission. For our audience and our viewers that don't know what that is, why don't you walk us through that a bit?
Yeah, definitely. Well, Business as Mission Canada, also known as BAM Canada, is a nonprofit organization that helps Canadian Christians who are in business, like they either own their business or maybe they teach in a business capacity, or they're a business student. So a business leader in Canada who's Christian understand how to integrate their faith into their work. And BAM Canada was started in 2021, so in the middle of the pandemic kind of time, because the co-founders were finding that there was a lot of Canadian Christians in business who felt isolated from each other and didn't know how to integrate what they believed about God and the world into their work.
Wow, you nailed a couple things about the mission and vision there that just really resonate because from a faith perspective, the importance of us, I like to use the word wholeness or oneness, where can we be consistent in a lot of different, the different arenas that we end up living in. Can we be consistent though in all that, and especially with our faith, are we bringing it wherever we go? And that other part that you mentioned about isolation, uh, I really want people to see that community is ultra important. Like we need to do life together. I think you would agree with this, but we're not designed to be walking through life alone.
Yeah, I very much agree with that.
So as I think about what BAM represents, why did you want to go work? I mean, I think you work there. I mean, you you gave many reasons for that, but how did you get introduced to them, and why did you get attracted to go there?
That's a big God story. So I didn't know what BAM was, didn't really think I'd be interested in that sort of thing if you would ask me, like in my studies. I was studying business marketing and media production. So I thought, oh, I could go, like those were two separate degrees. I did a double major, so it wasn't like it was one route together. So between the two of those, I was leaning more towards business marketing. And in my third year, during my studies at Redeemer University, I started wondering, how does my love of business, love of specifically marketing, actually fit together with my faith? I was wondering, like, how, when I enter the workforce, am I going to be able to say, yeah, I'm a Christian who's doing marketing, and could justify that? And so I started doing my own self-study on it. This is where some of the like nonfiction books come into to play, where I was starting to do my own study, like reading different books, like Garden City by John Mark Comer was a big one, that was telling me about actually what you mentioned in the intro about co-creating with God, and just saying that God's a creator, so actually you as a creator and you as a creator in marketing, kind of that's where I took it. You as a creator in marketing are actually doing the work of that God's called you to in just creating. And so in that, I read a couple other books and thought, actually, yeah, my work is set out by God. No, like if I'm doing work that's not sinful, it's actually just for the flourishing of human beings. So through that self-study, I didn't think anything really other beyond that. I knew I was entering the workforce in a year. And so I went into my fourth year. And during that time, I was prayerfully considering, okay, where am I going to be going next? Where is God leading me? And in my prayers, I felt like God was putting on my heart nonprofit. And I thought, I only took one nonprofit class during my time here at Redeemer. Like I studied business. I wasn't going into the nonprofit stream. And yet I looked back and saw actually through my studies, I did a couple work integrated learning projects with nonprofits. I had done a handful of those. And then I had also worked two of my 3 summers actually at nonprofits. And so I felt like, okay, actually God has set out probably my path for nonprofit, even though it didn't seem to align at first. And then as I came to the last 2 months of my studies, I thought, okay, I really need a job. But I was faced with this difficulty of, oh, do I get a job here in Hamilton that I can start right away and come back to? Or or do I get a job in BC? Because I was engaged at the time and we were getting married in BC. So I knew I'd have to at least go back for the wedding. So I thought, okay, is it going to be here or is it going to be there? And then my friend just one day was telling me, oh, I got a job offer from a place I didn't even apply to. She said I was an intern at BAM Canada, and I got a message from them asking if I wanted to be the marketing lead. And she's just telling me this casually, and she's like, but I'm not taking the job because of course I have a different job lined up. And I knew that she had that job, and I was thinking, well, could I maybe get that job that they're offering? And so I asked her, like, oh, would it be possible to kind of give them my name? And she's like, oh, of course. And so she gave them my name. They reached out, and quite soon after that, I was hired by them. And I was hired in a marketing lead position. So what I had studied, where I got to integrate my studies into that. I was hired at a nonprofit, and the position was remote. So I could take it from Hamilton, start there, move it to BC, and now bring it here to Edmonton. So it's, like I said, crazy God story.
You know, what I love about what you shared too is that originally you thought you were going to maybe end up in the business world, right?
Mm-hmm.
The for-profit, if we can put it that way.
Yeah.
You end up in the nonprofit sector working with for-profit, a lot of for-profit leaders as well. So I love how that's been intermingled into that.
Yeah, definitely. I look back and I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Just to think, somebody in this role needs to understand business, and yet you're totally like, I'm very much in the nonprofit space, but I get to apply what I learned through my studies in not just doing marketing, but actually working with business leaders and understanding what they do.
So tell me a little bit more here, because you're doing marketing, that you're the marketing lead, but in your role here, you actually ended up finding yourself becoming a host of a podcast, which you do amazing, by the way, and you invited me on there, and I appreciated that opportunity. And which, as I think about it, I think you might be the first podcast host that I have a conversation with on the It Matters podcast, which is pretty cool. So you're the first. But tell me a bit about that. How was that?
Yeah, so I kind of got thrown into that. Never expected to be a podcast host. I was on the the other side of podcasting. I was doing the editing, and I still do the editing and post-production. But I ended up becoming the host because our other host, Carrie Ann Ballantyne, who was one of the co-founders of BAM Canada, went on maternity leave. So we needed somebody else to fill the position. And we only have 3 people at BAM. So it was just thrown to me. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm taking this on. So it started out with me definitely being nervous coming to each of the podcast recordings, and slowly but surely I've gotten more comfortable. It feels like I've done a lot more than I actually have. I don't know if you feel the same way in podcasting, but I'm like, I feel like I've put in way more hours than I actually have. And I look back and I'm like, wow, I've only recorded 15 episodes. Feels like I'm on my 45th. So that's kind of how I feel about that. But it's been a very, very cool experience to be a part of.
Well, the neat thing about podcasting specifically, you start, in anything actually, you start mastering your craft, right? And the reality is, you become better at it. You end up figuring out how to maximize your potential in that. You really become an expert over time. But podcasting is unique, right? Because you're chatting with the individuals, you're learning from them as well, and it's a fun thing for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like I love listening to people anyways. So sometimes I get stuck in the listening where I'm like just really enraptured by what they're saying. And I'm like, oh yes, I just want to sit here and soak it all in. And then I have to remember, oh yeah, actually I'm asking the next question. I'm not just a listener. Like I have to kind of carry the conversation, moving on. So that's been an interesting thing to kind of balance and be like, how much can I sit here and take away what they're saying? But how much do I have to continue to ask the questions and dig deeper, which is also a great part of podcasting. Yeah. I really do like asking the questions too, but
yeah. Well, like I said, you do great at it. I've taken in many of your podcast episodes that you've done, and I'm excited for you as you continue to master that craft, because you're already doing great. But as you continue to do that, you're going to impact a lot of people. So
Thank you, Walter.
Of course. So a name like BAM Canada, the way it comes across, there you guys have a Canadian impact, a reach as well. What are you? Is there something interesting that you're seeing in your organization having that type of reach? Is there something that's kind of being highlighted to you across the country from like an organizational perspective, I guess?
Yeah, it is interesting working across the country for different reasons. Like, there's an interesting part of it is just like from our perspective as a team, and growing in the reach of what we're doing. It's like we are, as I said, 3 people. So 3 people working across the whole country is pretty challenging from that perspective, and pretty challenging to be able to help catalyze movements across Canada, because that's really the work we're doing. We're not trying to set up like chapters of our own things that go with BAM's agenda. It's more so, okay, what can we do locally that is going to fit your context locally? And so I think the other challenge besides that capacity challenge comes across with like the local contexts are all very different. What's happening in Vancouver is going to look different than what's happening in Edmonton, which is going to look different than what's happening in Regina and what's happening in Toronto, and then into the Maritimes. But they're all very different. And so we're trying to navigate, okay, what does it look like to help people in their context start a business as mission movement to help the business leaders there? I would say that's just been very interesting, and we're still in the navigation process of that, but it's really beautiful to see that there are so many different kinds of contexts, and there are different things happening in different parts of Canada. And I really appreciate how people can just make their own movement where they are.
You know what I appreciate about what you just pointed out too is a reminder to all of us leading in any type of capacity that it's not always about thinking inside a box or an umbrella idea where it's like, this is how we lead, this is treating everybody equal in the same way, in that they think the same way, they act the same way. Of course, we can have an overall vision, but the reality is that in different areas of Canada or other parts of the world, people will have different ways of leading and even reaching out to people, and that's important to catch, because I'm realizing these days that leadership, we need to be very careful that we don't just lead from our own understanding. We have to realize who we're leading, and realize that we're not leading people like ourselves all the time, and probably never really. We're the unique individual when we're leading ourselves, and then how are we leading others differently because they are different.
Yeah, very true. And even just like my experience living in 3 different provinces, I've seen that each place is different, and it's not all the time that crazy differences stand out, but Alberta is different than BC. BC is different than Ontario, and those are the 3 provinces I've experienced. People are different there. So that's just like the first groundwork. People are different just based on the province they're in. And then you get into all personality and where specifically they're from and their backgrounds. And I like how you put it. You have to know that you're the unique individual, and you're not going to be leading people who think the same way as you.
So in the name of the organization, and part of your guys' mission is that you're trying to help leaders be missional. You're trying to, if I can say it, that's an overall vision of making sure that faith leaders understand the importance of that. And so maybe to start out, why is it important in our time right now for businesses to be missional, for faith-based businesses to be missional? Like, can you unpack that for us a bit?
Yeah, I think the big thing there is that Christian business leaders have the opportunity to use their business for more. They have their opportunity to use their business for a purpose that aligns with what they believe about God, about the world, about society, about other people around them. And so I think at BAM Canada, like I started talking about with different contexts and different approaches, we want people to see that it doesn't have to be done the same way. You don't have to be missional as a business in the same way that you see your neighbor doing it. But you can take what God's given you and the gifts that you have to be integrating a strong faith purpose into your work. And so we do have an approach that helps business leaders do this. It's called the quadruple bottom line. So that means it's focusing on profit, which all businesses focus on if they're for profit. But then it expands to the planet and people, which you'll see is happening with the businesses in society that aren't faith-based. They're often now focusing on how to be sustainable and how to care for your employees. But then with BAM, we introduced the fourth quadruple bottom line, and that is to be purposeful. And that's looking at going deeper beyond the other three. It's how are you making your business impactful for the kingdom?
Wow. So I think from a faith-based perspective, businesses have a very unique opportunity. And not to say anything wrong with all the other businesses out there, because some of them are doing amazing things. But it seems to me like we have this opportunity from a faith-based perspective that we should be living out our values. We should be living out our belief system and what we stand for. And I appreciate that you as an organization and as individuals are calling that out of business leaders. It could be frustrating a little bit that you have to do that, but the reality is it's a challenge. And I'm glad that there's an organization out there right now putting effort and focus on helping those leaders to do that.
Yeah. And I think too, in the whole fact that you believe in God and own a business, you have to remember too, like the reason that you're missional is because you have the God of the universe on your side, and he can give you so much favor in your business and bless you in so many ways. And that doesn't always happen. There's definitely struggles, and there's definitely businesses owned by Christians who fail. So I'm not saying that's always what happens, but you have to believe that there's so much power on your side for goodness to happen through your business.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing that kind of popped into my mind while you were talking is that we have opportunities to be generous and to give and to serve people and to love on people. I think a general concept that we understand about business is that we're trying to solve problems, and we're also trying to serve people in that process. And I love that those are some of the core steps and values that you guys are making sure that that people are paying attention to, and how actually making sure that it's being delivered. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So maybe this will be a bit of an odd question, because you are in this field working with these different leaders, and I think you guys are being pretty successful at it from my understanding and the conversations you and I've had. Are you though seeing that there's still a need for missional leaders though? Are we in a situation right now that, hey, like we got a ways to go, or how are you feeling about that?
Yeah, like I think from my perspective in having conversations with business leaders, there's the people who get it right off the bat. There's the people who they've already heard about it maybe, or when you talk about it, they understand. They understand, oh yeah, I'm called to be missional, or I'm already being missional. They know how to integrate their faith into their work. And then there's the people who don't know that yet. And when we talk to them, they're more skeptical. Maybe they're like, how does this actually work? Or they're like, well, this would have been helpful when I started my business, but how do I kind of do it now that I'm already in business? And it doesn't just click for them right away. And so it takes a little bit more time to say, like, actually, you can be a missional leader through your business. And sometimes there's success with that, and sometimes there's not, and that's okay. And then there's the business leaders who are Christian who just haven't heard that they can do it, who haven't really thought about it. And that's because of the sacred secular divide, most likely in their life, where they think this part of my life, owning a business, is secular. And when I go to church on Sunday, or when I pray and read my Bible, that's like the sacred part of my life. And the two don't overlap. Right. So we find there is a need for more missional business leaders, because there are people who just yet don't understand and are still under that or the belief, maybe they don't even see it, of the sacred secular divide.
Mm. So maybe there's another thing that'll pop up here, but for challenges, uh, uh, is getting people to realize that they can be missional or they should be missional. Is that a major challenge? Like yeah, that communication part of it, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think it is a challenge because often the follow-up question is like if they understand, oh, I can be missional, like okay, it's possible to integrate my faith into their work. Their question is like, how practically can I do that?
Mm,
And then we can offer them some examples of saying like, oh, this business leader has done this or this business leader has done this, but it's very different from person to person within the industry they're in, the experience they have, um, the connections they have. Like it's just it differs
mm,
from business leader to business leader. So yes, we have a challenge in communicating the practicality of it often. And that's one of the reasons we actually have the podcast, because we wanted to share the stories that would inspire and say, this is a way to be missional, and this is another way. So maybe you can take this piece and this piece and this piece from all these stories, and incorporate it into your business.
I love it. That's so good. Yeah, yeah, that's where the podcast comes in very handy. You're providing another resource for these leaders. Are you finding that these leaders that you're chatting with, are they open about understanding what it means to be missional?
Open in what way?
Like, you find that when you're chatting with them, like they're going, oh, like you're right, I do need to be missional from a faith-based perspective. I do need to live out my my faith walk. Or are you finding that they're being a little bit like, oh no, I want to keep those separate? Is there a are you finding that to be a conflict at all?
Yeah, it's definitely a conflict with um, some who have the understanding, like who see the sacred secular divide in their life maybe and think, yeah, I want it separate, which
Hmm,
those are the harder ones to deal with, because then it's like, okay, they see it, they know that, and we can't do really anything else in
right.
pushing them towards being missional. But then there's those who are already doing something like donating a lot of their profits to a charity of some sort, and that's good work. We say that all the time. It's good work to be um, donating some of your profits to a charity and supporting other organizations and being generous. But we think business as mission goes further than that. It's not just about donations and being generous. It's about intrinsically, as your business, how are you missional?
Hmm,
So, profits aside, donations aside, are you in your actions as a business
hmm,
living out your faith? And so there's people who just stay back and say, no, like we're doing enough already. We don't really want to make our business like missional
hmm,
fully, like holistically.
hmm,
And so then that's just a different conversation, because are doing they are integrating their faith in some capacity, just not the way in which that we say um, is possible with your business.
hmm. Huh, I find that very interesting. Um, So I have a question for you because that kind of popping in my mind. As you know, I'm focused on leadership and
Mhm.
I 100% with you on the organizational leadership, and I truly believe that, and I'm all about that. I also believe in the individual leadership development. I I think this might be a given, but you're seeing a connection that the leader, because the leader can determine the outcome, the direction of an organization, especially if they're they have a position that gets them to do that.
Mhm.
So are we seeing then a need potentially for leaders, individual leaders that are running these companies, these businesses, um, to we need to invest in them a little bit in growth and equipping them, so then the organization can follow their lead in that way?
Yes, yeah, definitely. You nailed that. And that's who we work with most of the time. We
Okay.
say business leaders in general because we want to encompass those. We don't want to just say entrepreneurs, because not all business owners call themselves an entrepreneur.
Of course.
But we don't want to say uh, like only business owners then, because we don't want to limit people who are, as I said, maybe in the academics of teaching business, or a business student, or even an employee of a business who just wants to learn more about it. So we say business leaders in general, but that really, we do have a focus on the person with influence at the top, and definitely helping them to develop the understanding of what BAM is, and the understanding of their faith and work integration.
I love it. Yeah, and then you're going to see that ripple into wherever it goes. So on that note, do you have maybe you have a story or a thought? What kind of we just talked about challenges, but I assume that you're also seeing some great victories. There's some good things going on from your organization's perspective, but also like in Canada and different businesses. Do you have maybe a thought or a story that it's highlighted in your mind about that?
Yeah, I think of one business in Ontario, and they're kind of our golden business that we look at and we're like, wow, they were doing this before BAM Canada started in 2021. They've been in business for over 20 years. But what they do as a business is they hit all 4 quadruple bottom lines, and they hit them so just so intentionally. And so on the profit side, they're just reinvesting their profit into the work as a business, which funds the rest of these things. So not to kind of breeze past profit, but they're profitable and they're reinvesting it. But then on the people side, they have on just under 20 employees, I believe, and they have the owner wanting to have a succession plan, and so he's been selling off parts of the business to his employees, so they have ownership in the business, so that it will continue on past his lifetime, and that they will be able to benefit from owning the business. And in that, he's really taking care of his employees in that way. That's just one of the ways we see him doing his business missionally, through the people aspect. But then from the planet aspect, his business is actually, it's very much focused on the planet as an environmental conservation somewhat of a business. It's kind of hard to explain. They go into production, like facilities, factories, and they eliminate the waste. And they not just destroy waste, they actually reduce the amount of waste that's coming out of these factories. So that's the work that they do. So on that, just as a whole, the whole mission of their business is planet focused. But what they also did is install a blue roof at their organization. So a blue roof, for anybody who doesn't know, is instead of having like solar panels on the roof, they're like, you know what, we can make a snow bank, so that all the snow that comes and falls when it snows in Ontario, like it does, it will be collected there and it gets melted down. And that water is used in the toilets and for the air conditioning in the summer, and for any other like kind of water that doesn't need to be sanitized for people. It does go through a filtered process, but then it also waters their plants in their office, and it's just used for so many different things. So they can save on their heating costs too, because the blue roof provides insulation on the top, so the heat all is not escaping all the time. And there's so many benefits to this. So just as a business, they installed that on the top of their building. So a very practical way that we can say to businesses, well, have you ever considered a blue roof? It's just like, it's a way to be a steward of the resources you have. And then from the purpose perspective, they do all this from a place that is intentional about creating sustainability. So they're very focused on sustainability. And even so that they started out of their business, a business in Uganda that helps, and South Sudan that helps people there be able to create their own water filters, biosand water filters, so that they can have clean drinking water. And they don't just go and buy all these biosand filters. They teach the people there how to build them. They create employment there in Uganda and South Sudan to create biosand filters. And then when they take their employees out there, because they do that as well, they take some of their employees out there. They don't get their employees to build these biosand filters, because the people in Uganda and South Sudan can do it better than them. Right. They get their employees to say, like, if they're in accounting, they help the people there who own those biosand filter businesses to understand accounting better, or they teach them more about sales, or they teach them something that's going to be relevant to their business there through the skills that they have here in Canada. And so we've just seen that they are missional not only here in Canada, but they're missional across the world. And we're like, they're doing amazing work in creating jobs and creating a sustainable just employment for people out there. But then also doing amazing work here. So that's kind of a story, and you can hear more on the BAM Canada podcast about that story specifically, but also about others.
And we'll definitely put in the show notes a link to the podcast, because one thing I've enjoyed listening to the podcast is the stories, the different business leaders that are in it and telling you, okay, this is how we're winning, right? And so I love that. It really comes up to me that, like, it's important to be intentional. Like, you just gave us an example of a company that is on purpose, being missional, hitting all the different points that you are encouraging and teaching, and they're doing amazing work. The impact is very real and powerful. And so it seems to me that if you're gonna reach these goals or reach this type of way of living, being missional, like, you gotta actually be intentional about it. And I think that's what you guys are trying to do there.
Yeah, that's very true. It all comes with intentionality, because I don't think you can be missional without intention. Like, I'm trying to think if you can live out your faith, but I think living out your faith is even intentional, because that's not our natural bend. Our natural bend is not to live out our faith often.
Right.
So yeah, I think it all includes intentionality.
Yeah, I think it's a constant reminder in anything we do. If we're gonna see or make a difference, it's gonna have to be on purpose. And I appreciate you reminding us that. So you have a unique, opportunity on a consistent basis to chat with different business owners on your podcast, and I think it's amazing, and because I get to experience that on a different way too, and I know how valuable that is, and I hold that very closely to my heart, because I cherish that. But I would love to hear from you. Are you seeing any common characteristics across the board in the podcasts that you have done, where you're seeing, I'm starting to realize that these type of characteristics are making good leaders or great leaders? Is there one or two that kind of pop up in your mind when it comes to that?
The first one I can think of is the desire to continue to learn and the desire to grow. And I think the humility that comes with knowing that you're gonna always be learning. So I think that's one that stands out to me, because there's people who come on the podcast and then they'll say, like, oh, this is what God's been teaching me recently, or this is what I'm learning, or this is a book that I read recently that really helped me understand this concept.
Right.
And I think that is where I'm like, oh, wow, they're still digging deep into learning more about their business, or learning more about their faith, or learning more about some other subject matter that matters to them. And I think that's where I'm like, yeah, we need to do that, because I've seen the pride of, nope, I don't need to learn anything else. I'm not going to take anything from what people say for me. And I don't think I think what makes a good leader is their humility to learn and grow.
Wow. I wasn't expecting that answer, and it's an amazing answer. And the reason I wasn't expecting it is because I fell into the trap of what everybody else likes to describe a great leader, a go-getter, has some strong sales characteristics, or they know how to command people, in which those are dangerous characteristics, because they can't be great. They're not great if you don't know actually how to lead in that. But this idea of being willing to learn, huge. I think that if you if you think you've arrived and you know it all, I think we're in trouble. And I think the reason we would want to learn more is because we're practicing humility. And I appreciate how you tied those two together, because as leaders, we need to humble we need to humble ourselves and realize that, hey, we don't know everything, and we do need other people.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
Yeah, and I think too, it's less so maybe in my conversations at BAM, but like I said, I have seen what happens when you don't want to learn anymore. You become stagnant, and you're not going to grow, and then you're not probably going to accept an idea like business as mission if you think you have it all, or you know it all. And I think even relationally, it becomes very challenging to say, yeah, actually, even though you're younger than me or you have different
Hmm.
experience.
Right.
I can still learn from you. So,
Yeah. Mm. I'm realizing there's something that we haven't really talked a lot about that I think that you guys are all about. Well, the whole BAM Canada kind of started on this idea of community and helping leaders not be isolated. Uh, why is that ultra important? I mean, I talk about community quite a bit. I believe in it. I think it's huge. How are you seeing community? Because there's one thing for you to come in and encourage that leader to be missional and equip them and resource them and educate them potentially on why it's important. Where does that community part fit in?
mhm. Yeah, we are strong believers that you can't do it alone. Um, you can maybe go alone for a little bit of time, but eventually you're going to burn out, or you're going to need some help in some way. So we believe that things are done better when they're done with other people,
Mm,
and especially with this movement, it's hard to stand up in a culture or society that pushes against a lot of what we're trying to be missional with.
mm,
Um, or just like the normal way of doing business is not always focused on people, the planet, and purpose. It can really be focused on profits, and business leaders can fall into that. And
mhm,
so to be able to combat that, it's very important that there's other people around you who are like-minded. And
mm,
so from the BAM Canada perspective, we've definitely seen community. We have an online network called the BAM Canada Network that helps people connect
mm,
with each other there. So it's like a LinkedIn mixed with a Facebook, but it's
mm,
specifically for the Christian Canadian Christian business leader. So we've been able to start cultivating that community. But honestly, more impact has come outside of that online community.
mm,
There's groups that meet. As I said, there's a BAM Vancouver who does a conference once a year, and then 4 lunches throughout the rest of the year. And that conference, just during that time, it's like 120 people are gathering, and they're all business leaders. Most of them own their own business, and they're there meeting other people who share the same faith. Maybe not the same denomination, but the same Christian faith
mm,
of and just being able to discuss around the table, how can I apply what the speaker just said to my business? That community is so much more important than
yeah.
any other kind of community where you're able to talk in that way about your everyday work, your everyday, what most of your week is made up of.
Mhm.
So we've seen that, and that's just one example of like a regional, local group that's gathering. But
Cool.
yeah, it's been very impactful to see the community.
I bet. I bet. I have no doubt about that. I mean, part of my business is something where I'm bringing leaders together. Mine has crossed the borders of faith and non-faith, um,
Mhm.
and the purpose behind it has been to let's bring leaders together because we're not designed and meant to do it alone.
Yeah.
And sometimes leaders, business leaders, carry that as a badge of honor, like, oh, I got this. Oh,
Yeah.
but maybe you maybe quote unquote got this for a short period of time, but longevity wise, there is no sustainability in that,
Yeah.
and it won't. And so I love that you guys are working on that, and I love how you're calling this a movement, by the way. That
Yeah.
this is not just a nonprofit organization trying to spread some good ideas and kind of help here and there. No, you guys are on mission yourselves, and you've created a movement, and you're trying to expand that movement across Canada, and to make sure that the other word that comes to mind is unification. You're
Mm.
trying to unify uh,
Mhm.
these leaders, which is amazing.
Mhm. Yeah, and we're starting the movement here in Canada because there was nothing business specific and mission related. The movement started in like 2002 in, I'm not sure where it exactly started, but there's a BAM Global movement. And so BAM Global is the one that we're actually really closely connected to. We have a partnership with, and BAM Global helps to catalyze these movements in different nations. So there's a BAM Netherlands, there's BAM China, there's BAM Russia, believe it or not, there's BAM India, there's BAMs all over the world. And so that movement is kind of, is now brought to Canada, but has started beyond us too, which has been very amazing to see.
That's so cool. You make a choice to join your movement. You might be joining it on a local level, but then you're going to be connected on regional, across the country, and now global. Connections are amazing. Like, you get to be part of something greater by choosing to be in community, and also choosing for yourself to lead better. So I love that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Man, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I love dissecting what you guys are doing, and what you're all about, and also the way you think about leadership specifically, and how you're growing, and how what you're learning in the process. I am wondering though, is there a specific leadership advice that's been given to you that really has impacted your life? Is there something that, I don't know, like it could be something you got told when you joined BAM? Maybe it was before that, maybe in school. Is there an advice that has kind of you held on to help you lead at the capacity you're leading in?
That's such a good question. I think back to one of my favorite classes I took at Redeemer, and it was a leadership class, and it was so amazing. It was our prof was great by herself, but then she brought in people from her network, and they always had some wisdom to say, and my notebook was always filled at the end of class. And so now I'm like, I should have like one piece from that class, but I'm like, I think there was too many that it was just like, what even can stand out from it? Because overall, I really appreciated everything I learned in the class. But I think it was probably the first week of that class. And it's something actually you and I discussed in the podcast that I hosted with you, was that a leader is not always going to be a leader. They're also a follower. Every leader has to be a follower. And then there's the people who maybe follow most of the time. They also have the capacity to lead. And I know you believe that as well. And I just sat there and was like, what? Leaders also follow? Like, I just had this moment where I was like, and maybe it's like because of just the way I see the world sometimes in a prideful lens, I was like, what? I'm a leader. How am I supposed to also follow? And yet, if I look back, I would probably been like, yeah, of course I follow in different ways. But I think it struck me because of the humility of it, to be like, no, every leader actually follows, and that's part of their role. And actually, as we discussed, that's a way you grow.
Yeah.
That is a huge way in which you can become a better leader, because you follow leaders as a follower, and you can see, is this leader a good leader? Is this a leader I want to be like, or is this leader somebody I don't want to be like? I'm not going to take what they're doing, or I see some good in it, but I'm going to take that good and become a stronger leader. So I think that was probably my like big wow moment, and it happened at the beginning of class, and I'm thankful for that. That would be
That's
my
beautiful. I love that. I think we can remind our audience that as leaders, we have this privilege to serve our people. And I think that we can get caught up, and I think we've all done it probably in one way or another, is we think people are serving us, like our team is serving us, right? That they're there to make sure that they're there to execute what we want them to do. And the reality is, if we flip that and we're there to serve people, and you go, okay, we understand the mission, we understand the vision. How do I equip you? How do I love on you? How do I give to you? How do I set up this platform so you can do your best? Because as leaders, we have the privilege, the resources, sometimes the ability to be able to to invest in our people. And so sometimes we get to be put in a spot to follow our team, right? And so I love that you pointed that out. I think that's another great reminder that as leaders we need to learn how to follow. And I think I'll add, and I think you'll agree with this. We've been talking about being missional and being faith focused. One of the best ways we can be a follower is following the way of Christ, and making sure that we have what I like to call our vertical alignment figured out. Make sure that God's at the top, and then let the rest kind of fit in appropriately. But we need to learn how to follow. If we don't follow, that's where we may end up having some challenges in being missional and sharing our faith, or whatever you want to insert there.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Awesome. Well, as we kind of close up here, one thing that I love to ask our guest on the It Matters podcast, because we want to talk about things that matter, and that is in your life right now and where you're at in the season that you're leading. What matters to you right now? And that could be related to your work and whatever you're doing, or not. And so I'm just curious from you, what matters to you right now?
Yeah, I think this could go a couple different ways. Now I'm like, ooh, which way? One of the things that I think is something I heard just a couple weeks ago that could be relevant to not only me, but your audience in this time, is that contentment doesn't equal complacency. And in that, even where you are, if you're content in where you are, and I hope you are content, it doesn't mean that you should stop growing and moving and seeking out new kind of adventures or opportunities. I don't think complacency is good for anyone, to just sit there, or stagnancy like we talked about before. So I think it matters to me that we do keep growing, and that I personally keep growing and learning new things. So yeah, that's what matters.
I love it. I love it. That is a great way to end our episode today. And yeah, that was an amazing answer. Thank you for sharing that. So if we have our listeners who want to connect with you, want to find out more about BAM Canada, and just get in touch with you, how would they do that? Where would they find you?
Yeah, if you want to get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn is the best way. So my name's Abigail Stearns, so you can just look up Abigail Stearns on LinkedIn. And if you want to get in contact with BAM at all, we have a website that has contact forms. So that's businessasmission.ca. And so you can fill out the contact form, or you can reach us at info@businessasmission.net. Oh, sorry. That's bamcanada.net. Sorry. That's info@bamcanada.net at the email address. And then we also have a LinkedIn. So you can reach out to us at Business as Mission, and then I'll have BAM in parentheses Canada on LinkedIn.
Cool. Awesome. And like I said, we'll put that in the show notes, and make sure that everybody has access to that. I really appreciate you joining me on this episode. Everybody listening, please go check out what Abigail and the team are doing over at BAM Canada. They're doing something very special. And even if maybe you're listening to this and you're not a faith-based leader, I don't think it would hurt you to just learn a bit more about what they're doing, and ask questions. And if you know of somebody that needs to hear this episode, please comment, ask us questions. You can ask Abigail a question. We can direct them to her. But share the episode. Add value to somebody who needs to hear this episode, because it was full of gold and nuggets and great stuff. And so I appreciate you, Abigail. This has been really good. Thanks for joining me on the It Matters podcast.
Thank you for having me, Walter. And thank you for teaching more people how to grow in their leadership.
I appreciate that. Well, I'm glad we were able to do that together today. And so on that note, for everybody listening, thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next episode. And remember, it is a win-win when the leader leads well. Bye for now.